Hey guys, it's Laura. Something I've heard over and over again is that sitting is the new smoking. While I personally don't really like this comparison, I think it gets the point across pretty well. Sitting for long periods of time isn't good for you. I've also seen more and more about standing desks. Standing is the new thing, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So in this video, I want to talk about sitting and standing in the workplace. And I also want to share how I've applied this into my own life. As a disclaimer, I am not a professional in this space. I just want to share the research that I've done, and I'm really just somebody who's passionate about treating my body in a healthy way. If you haven't already, feel free to hit that subscribe button if you're interested in seeing more videos about work-life balance, healthy activities, and just general fun shenanigans. Alright, so most of us are probably aware that sitting for 8+ hours a day isn't good for you. Should be pretty intuitive, right? I hope so, because our bodies are not meant for sitting around all day. Our bodies were built to move. I'm a big fan of the biomechanist Katy Bowman. She wrote Move Your DNA, which I recommend to everybody who is interested in learning more about how to move their body in a healthy, dynamic way. So in that book and in her other works, she talks about the importance and the science behind natural movement. She wrote another book called Don't Just Sit There, and she argues that we should be working towards a more dynamic workstation. We want to aim to load the body in different ways throughout the day. For instance, we can load the body in different ways just by sitting in different positions. Sitting in a chair with legs parallel at 90 degrees, crossing your legs, squatting on the ground, sitting on the floor cross-legged, feet under your butt, knees tucked to your chest, and so on. Now let's be real. Sitting on the floor at work or at school might be weird. While this may not be realistic if you're working in a public place like an office or in the library or in a classroom, there are little ways to make it work if you are so determined. For me, I've definitely booked windowless conference rooms so I can just have a break from sitting down in a chair, so I may stand up, walk around, or just sit on the floor with my laptop. Thankfully, no one has walked in on me in a conference room when I'm doing this, but it's a nice trick that I like to use every once in a while. And while we're sitting, we want to make sure that we're sitting with proper alignment. So what does this even look like? Here are some tips that I grabbed from Katy Bowman's book about how to sit with alignment in a chair. Sit in a zero-rise chair, meaning one with a horizontal sitting surface rather than an angled one. For chairs that angle down, like the seats in your car, you can fold up or roll a towel to create a more horizontal sitting surface. Nowadays, I permanently keep a folded towel in the driver's seat of my car since I spend a minimum of 8 hours driving every Monday through Thursday. I've actually noticed major improvements in the way my back and body feel by the end of the week. Next is to sit close to the edge of the chair to help you roll your pelvis forward. This helps lift the tailbone away from the chair. And now a more obvious tip. Try not to round your shoulders or jet your head out. We're constantly hunched over our phones, computers, and other devices. And this is something I try to be really conscious of. A trick I use is to periodically check and see if my ears are in line with my collarbone, and I want to think about keeping my shoulders rolled back. I'll admit, it's a habit that takes some time to develop, but I've found that over time I'm naturally more aware of how my body is positioned. I know that there are some products that can physically help you put your body into a better position, but from the research that I've done, I don't think they're necessarily a good option, particularly the ones where you can tighten straps to physically move your shoulders back. These types of products do the work that your muscles need to be doing. So if you're not using these muscles, you're actually weakening these muscles, and it's going to be harder for you long term to keep your shoulders back. Okay, let's talk about standing. As I mentioned before, it's really important for you to change up how you position your body throughout the day. Thankfully, standing has become a more acceptable working position in recent years. But just like sitting, you don't want to stand all day. But when you do stand, you want to make sure that you have proper alignment. So a few more tips from Katy's book. Aim to have your feet pelvis width apart, parallel, and facing forward. Try to align the outside edges of your feet with a straight edge. Keep your legs vertical. Your hips, knees, and ankles should stack vertically, so your pelvis should be back over your heels rather than over the front of your feet. Contrary to what many of us have been told over the years, keep your ribs down. Yep, that means not jutting out your chest. You want to aim to have the front part of the lowest rib stacked vertically over the front of your pelvis. Relax your kneecaps and don't lock your knees. Now this one might be tricky for many of us and it may sound weird, but aim to keep your knee pits neutral. So your knee pits should align directly behind you as your feet point straight ahead. Most people will have to externally rotate their thighs for this. And finally, keep your head ramped up. Think about sliding your head back towards the wall behind you until your ears are stacked over your shoulders. You don't want to achieve this by lifting your chest or your rib cage or picking up your head by the chin. I know, there's a lot to standing properly. I definitely don't stand perfectly, but I think it's really helpful to know what I need to be thinking about. And that way I can make a conscious effort to improve. Want to know what's crazy though? There really isn't any way to stand in proper alignment if you are wearing positive heeled shoes. So this means any shoe that gives you a lift in your heels. And guess what? We see this with the vast majority of shoes on the market. High-heeled shoes are obvious, but even men's dress shoes often have a positive heel. So you've probably heard about barefoot shoes or minimalist shoes. They basically aim to mimic being barefoot. While being truly barefoot is optimal for foot health, these types of shoes are a little bit more socially acceptable than walking around barefoot in today's society, especially in the workplace or at school. And if you're somebody who's interested in transitioning over to barefoot or minimalist shoes, I do want to mention that you want to be very mindful in how you transition to barefoot shoes, especially if you've never worn them before. Reading Move Your DNA and Whole Body Barefoot, as well as being super patient, really helped make this transition smooth for me. I've personally made more of a commitment to wearing more barefoot and minimalist shoes in the workplace, and there are 3 main things that I look for in a shoe. One is a zero drop heel, meaning the heel is at the same height as the ball of the foot. Number 2 is a wide toe box. I don't want my toes shoved into a shoe. It's not comfortable and it's not even close to the shape of a normal natural foot. And number 3 is a shoe that wouldn't be ridiculous to wear to work. Let's be honest, there are some barefoot shoes that look kind of goofy. And even the shoes without that 5-finger design still take a little getting used to visually, especially with the wider toe box. There are a lot of great brands out there, and I think there's a very good chance that we're going to see more and more companies move into the barefoot and minimalist market. I've personally had a really great experience with Vivo Barefoot shoes, and if you haven't already, I would recommend you check out the review that I did a few months back. So now that we've talked about sitting and standing in great depth, I want to give you a few examples of some of the things that I've done in my life to have a more dynamic workspace. Take plenty of walking breaks. I think it's fairly reasonable to aim for getting up and walking around for at least 5 minutes every hour. I do my best thinking when I'm walking, so if I have to think through a problem or I'm stuck on something, moving around can really help me think more clearly. This is also a great chance for you to get some fresh air and get outside. Set reminders on your phone or on your work calendar to change positions throughout the day. Make time for stretch breaks. I really try to focus on calf, hip, chest, and shoulder stretches, as well as forward folds and even wrist and finger stretches. Let me know if you'd be interested in seeing a video about some of my favorite stretches in the workplace in the comments down below. When looking at a phone, think about holding it more upright so you're not as hunched over. This takes some getting used to, but it's one of those little things that goes a long way in helping you improve your posture and your alignment. Be mindful of how you set up your workspace. I personally keep my laptop on a stand and use an external keyboard and mouse. That way I can make sure I've got my computer physically further away from me, yet closer to eye level. While this technically isn't related to sitting or standing, I still think it's really important to mention giving your eyes a break from staring at screens. Especially when I'm working on a computer, I try to look away from my screen, usually at the furthest point in the room, every 5 to 10 minutes. Alright, we have covered a ton in this video. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys!